Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Sylvain. I'm an artist, and I like to make videos about the relationship between art, machinery, and a little bit of history. So welcome, let's get into it. So, back when I was growing up, my dad showed me one of the best films I think I've ever seen in my life, and I think it still remains my favorite film to this day. Empire of the Sun is probably my favorite film ever, definitely my favorite Spielberg film. This was mainly because I watched it at a very young age, so there's probably that, but also planes. I like planes. Give me more planes. Yeah, we love planes. I think he likes planes. Specifically, the A6M0. Now, the A6M0 is still my favorite plane of all time. It is hard to wrap my mind around exactly why I find it the best, but here's my best attempts of trying to do so. Starting with, well, when I was a kid, these scenes from the film. And this one. And also this one. Oh, and definitely this one. Yeah. So growing up, I see this film and I'm like, wow, like there's such a story here, of this young boy growing up and then, finding finding myself in the main character and that love for planes, just resonated with me as a young kid, especially like the whole scene where he finally gets to see the Zero for the first time in person rather than just a toy in his room. And sort of the same story for me, except it happened a lot later when I finally visited Pearl Harbor. Um, so as I grew up through my life, I made lots of different models of the aircraft. I've made quite a lot of models of stuff, namely, and a lot of stuff you'll see in this channel. But there's none that really drew me more when it comes to flight than the Zero. I don't know what it is. So let's dive into it together and find out what actually makes the Zero so freaking cool. Well, I first started out, I had the discovery that I could make stuff that actually flew as a kid, and that was like a huge, holy crap. You have no idea how crazy it is when you build something out of like cardboard or foam and you throw it and you realize that it can actually fly. It's not just like a store-bought thing. That there's a sense of wonder there that just is totally like you feel like you can do anything. It's amazing. It's really cool. I really highly recommend go back to being a kid and try that. So there's also an interesting dynamic with the storytelling of the aircraft in the movie, and as well as the aircraft itself and how it played its part in the Second World War. I mean, what's really cool about the Zero was that when it first came out, it was way more advanced than anything anybody had ever seen before. I mean, this was something that could outmaneuver anything that the Americans had at the time, and probably outmaneuver anything that even like the British or anybody else had on the Axis powers had at the time. Yeah, the Zero was just it was like a mosquito compared to all these other aircraft at the time. But the thing that really sort of was its shortcoming was not its design inherently when it was built, but it was the lack of update as the war progressed. So that was mainly its drawback, and it's eventually because it didn't have any kind of funding to really improve it over generation, the same as say like the Spitfire would. Check out my new other video on that. Pretty sweet. Yeah, it just sort of towards the middle to later stages of the war, coming on like 1944, 1945, it was kind of obsolete, and then was sort of treated as disposable, sort of. And it's really quite sad because we don't have a lot of examples because of that to look at today. What made it different than every other aircraft? Everyone loves Spitfire. Everyone loves 109, Messerschmitt. The P-40, all fantastic aircraft. Mustang, obviously, we all know these. But there's something about the Zero, which I can't put my finger on, which the internal artist in me just can't let go. It just is always drawn to it, and I don't know why, and I want to try to figure out why. One of the reasons I suspect is probably due to its styling and the way it looks, first of all. Just as a visual artist, that's the first thing that pops into my head, so let's explore that. you see similarities in the design of the Zero with other beautiful aircraft like the Spitfire, and then the way the wing comes up against the fuselage on the trailing edge, and the way that the canopy is just sort of bubbling out, like, similar to the later generations of bubble canopy Mustangs, that kind of thing. And so there's these characteristics, design characteristics. Then you also get the interesting radial engine design with the big nose cone. Big radial engines always look really, really cool. Yes, Mitsubishi made this aircraft. The same Mitsubishi that made this and this. Yeah, people didn't know that. Pretty cool, huh? Anyway, um, how did it go from super advanced to obsolete? Well, it's just a matter of updating it. And one of the weaknesses that a lot of people who are nerds on the topic will know, but if you're not aware, um, simple things such as self-sealing fuel tanks. You get shot in the tank, you just sort of bleed out fuel until you run out. In addition, the aircraft couldn't really handle negative G maneuvers. I don't I might be wrong, but I think it was like it couldn't handle maybe no more than negative half a G, because, or for any sustained period of time. What would end up happening is the float bowls, I believe, in the carburetors would actually sort of choke out the engine, because of the lack of gravity feeding. So you'd always find, especially people who play like War Thunder or whatever, say you're flying this way and you got an enemy down here, you have to invert your aircraft and dive around and then loop back around and come down. You can't just drop down because then you'll stall the engine out. Yeah, there's just really interesting tactics on how you had to fly it. So it was like it was a very unique aircraft when all these things came together, and there was no armament. That was one of the most incredible things about this aircraft. There's no armor. The idea was the aircraft would be so maneuverable that it would just outmaneuver anything and would never get shot at. That was the whole idea. That was the whole principle. You're sacrificing, armament and the idea of being able to take a beating, substituting it with the concept of, well, don't get shot at. Of you could outmaneuver pretty much anything at the time, and it did, and it was terrifying. So, what is it about the Zero? In addition to its visual appeal, what makes the aircraft so interesting to me as an artist? But I feel like there's something tied with the combination of things. It's always like a combined effect. It's the look of the aircraft, and it's the story of the aircraft. There's sort of a beauty to flying an aircraft with no armament but is super maneuverable because of it, in the same sense that it's almost like instead of a motorcycle rider with a windshield and all of the padding and the leather and the gear and the helmet and everything, it's almost like a guy who was just came off the beach in swim shorts, hopped on a 1000cc motorcycle and just bombed the highway. Well, you're gonna have better flexibility, better range of motion, at the expense of your own safety. The philosophy behind the way you fly a Zero and the mentality you got to have, there's something about that. But in combination to the way it looks, the elegance of the way the wing shape is, and something that's also extremely important: proportions. Proportions are everything. If you get a vehicle of any kind, whether it's aircraft, anything, and your proportions are weird, people pick up on it. Even if they don't know exactly what it is, they can't put their finger on it, they'll pick up on it. And I think it's kind of similar with like a lot of people picking up why maybe the Cybertruck looks kind of weird. Zero, for me, I don't know, just kind of tickles that part of your brain. You know what I mean? I think in addition to supporting that the beauty of the aircraft is necessary for the function of it, that makes it, that compounds itself. It's even more beautiful now. Like the beauty of having an organic shape to be able to not only look pretty, but cut through the air in just a specific kind of way. Almost anything that tries to cut through the air at like 500 miles an hour, it's like a puzzle piece. It just fits just right in your brain. You go, yeah, that is right. That's correct. And it looks cool. Nobody ever looks at any fighter jet from nowadays and goes, oh, that's ugly. No. No, like when something can go like 2,000 miles an hour, like an F-18, it's gonna look pretty. And it's the same thing with the Zero, but its own unique way. Something really, I can't put my finger on it. There's sort of a metaphor of the aircraft. The design was very advanced for its time, and then it kind of drops off. It has just this really brief period of absolute excellence comparatively, and then it sort of just drops off very drastically and kind of has arguably kind of like a tragic end or association with it. And I feel like it kind of speaks for itself. Impermanence. I think impermanence is the way to go about it. It's like the Zero was just a little blooming of a flower and then quickly died. But you know, if you looked too quickly or you walked too past it too quickly, you might miss it. It really was like a little flower that bloomed very, very brightly and then died shortly after. A lot of people understand the kamikaze attacks towards the end of the war and the more desperate hours of the Japanese Empire, or the Imperial Navy at that time. A lot of these guys who didn't want to do it, but they knew that that was what they sort of had to do to retain honor in their family and retain honor especially for the emperor at the time and for their country. Mixture of patriotism and honor that is so essential to the Imperial Navy and Japan and during the Second World War. As a result of this, there's actually like almost no examples of any of these Japanese aircraft from the time. I mean, when I went to the Pearl Harbor exhibit, according to the museum, there's only 2 original examples of the Kate bomber, a very close cousin of the Zero, but like a bomber version. Of the 2 versions that ever exist, only one of them is at that museum, and that's the better one. Let me show you a picture of what that looks like. This is the better version of the 2, as far as like surviving. I can't imagine what the other one looks like. And so it just sort of shows that this amazing design in the other part of the war, you know, especially around 1940, just became totally disposable by the end of it. And it was just so, it's just so sad in the sense of the flying it into enemy warships. There's that whole aspect, but also there's just like a tragedy to this amazing design that never got updated the way it deserved to. I feel like when you see this aircraft in real life, the presence it has, it's such a beautiful combination of elegance, fortitude, strength, and pride. But at the same time, it's like it's all being played on a minor key. Like it's just all kind of got this real gritty sadness to it. It's really, really hard to describe. That's why anybody likes making a war film. People like war films because they combine beauty, storytelling, sadness, and grit all sort of together in a way that was real, that actually happened. And I think it's the same story when you tell that story about the Zero. I mean, there's nothing that kind of evokes that emotion more than, at least out of an aircraft, than that aircraft for me. How does it make you feel? It's not I don't tell you how to feel. What does the Zero feel for you? Let me know in the comments. What is it? What aircraft has that for you? What machinery touches you the most when it comes to an artistic perspective? There's something beautiful about, you know, 2 separate worlds who should hate each other coming together because of a shared interest in aircraft. It's just a concept of flight. Something as simple as that can bring 2 nations that are totally at war together. Hopefully maybe you are willing to take a look at that 1987 film and tell me what you think in the comments. Also, why do you like the Zero? Why do you hate the Zero? Let me know in the comments as well. Love to hear it. Thanks guys, I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.